All right, it's exactly 2 o'clock. Welcome to 2021 Sunstone Symposium. Yes, I can't talk, but I can read. Symposium session 151, Mormon Tarot and its implications for the past, present, and future. At Sunstone, we are making it a goal to build a community that allows many ways for people to express their faith. Our tagline is, "There's more than one way to Mormon." We invite you to help us build a community where all paths are given space to be better understood. Please support us in our mission by making a donation and subscribing to Sunstone at sunstone.org. About this presentation, Mormonism has a unique history rooted in esotericism. As the years have passed, however, churches with Mormon roots have sought to become more acceptable to the modern world. But some members are embracing the esoteric impulse in our tradition. In this panel, we will introduce 3 creators of Mormon tarot decks, present some background and history of tarot cards, and demonstrate why the symbolism of Mormonism lends itself so well to tarot. How do modern creators of tarot adapt the symbolism of ancient Mormonism, of ancient tradition, to bring forth mind-expanding ways of viewing the world? Their processes give insights into what Joseph Smith was doing as he created Mormonism and offers peculiar and extraordinary ways of building on our religious roots. It'll take a second to introduce you to our speakers before we begin. First of all, Cheryl Bruno is a poet, artist, historian, and author specializing in Freemasonry and Mormonism. Josh Baird is an artist and indie tarot creator. You can find his work at mormontarot.com. I'll now give the floor to our presenters.
So hello everyone, I'm Josh Baird. Let's see if I can get this mic a little more. I'm an artist and creator of the Mormon Tarot. And like Will Bagley calls himself, I'm a heritage Mormon. I want to thank Cheryl Bruno for inviting me to participate in this panel, and I want to congratulate her on finishing her Joseph Smith themed tarot deck. And it's not easy to independently create and publish a tarot deck, and I think she did a great job, so check it out afterwards. So I'm going to talk about why esotericism resonates with Mormon culture and how tarot has evolved over the centuries, and how the Mormon tarot uses tarot imagery and symbols. First, a little background. For the first 30 years of my life, I had zero interest in doing art related to Mormonism. I was interested in landscape painting, the light and the space and the geology of specifically the Colorado Plateau, which is, I live down in Kanab. And I'm still a painter, always will be. I love it. As a painter, the more you understand the behavior of light, the perception of space, and the principles of design, the better your paintings become. For me, this is the core of esotericism. When you remove all the trappings, it's simply about wanting to figure things out so you can be better at what you do. And whether it's art, music, writing, relationships, or just living life, a more fulfilling life, the more you know, the better you become. And this understanding is not always low-hanging fruit. You might say esotericism is the study of uncommon sense. So many laws of nature are not very obvious. You have to go out on a limb, so to speak. You have to go out and paint on location, get sunburned and bitten by mosquitoes. But it's always rewarding to figure things out and live up to your potential, or in Mormon speak, to fill the measure of your creation. So the Baird family tradition, it caught up with me when I was in my early 30s. And this was painted by my grandfather. All throughout my early life, I had scriptures with a little Articles of Faith card that had this on the card, and I honestly never read that it was painted by my grandpa. I didn't know that. It was just an Article of Faith card. How many of you have seen that painting? Just curious. Yeah, it's kind of one of the older Mormon artwork staples, I guess. So he was the He was the lead architect of the Nauvoo restoration in the 60s, and my dad grew up there. And together they built a model of the Nauvoo temple that was in the, last time I checked, in the visitor center. And then my dad, at the age of 21, built this model of the Nauvoo temple out of white bronze. And it was standing on the original temple grounds until 2002, when they built the new construction. There's my contribution. So it's kind of interesting. So it all begins for me in 2009, the whole Mormon tarot journey that I've been on at a strange shop in Pike Place Market, Seattle, called Tenzing Momo. It's the oldest apothecary and the largest on the West Coast. And curiosity got the best of me, and I bought 2 tarot decks from this very guy in the photo. I found this photo online. Anyway, and he looked just like that when I bought the tarot cards. I bought these 2 cards. They're published in the 1970s, both of them. I bought them because the images resonated with me, the symmetry, the colors, and the geometry. And my mind sort of exploded with questions about what these cards were all about. This is my 3rd tarot deck, which is actually the most common of all tarot decks. The Rider-Waite-Smith is, it's become sort of the tarot standard. And not everyone agrees with that, but regardless, these are the images most tarot users pore over when seeking answers to their existential questions. So just real quick, if any of you are new to tarot, here's a quick Tarot 101. Think about a playing card deck. Only the suits are swords, cups, wands, and coins for the most part. Replace the Jack and the Court cards with a page and a knight. Add a 5th suit of 22 allegorical images representing the big picture aspects of life. These cards are called the Major Arcana. In the other 4 suits, called the Minor Arcana, the Ace through 10 cards represent the day-to-day aspects of life, and the Court cards represent aspects of one's identity. Anyway, that's in a nutshell. What you do, you think of a pressing question while you shuffle the cards. There are many layouts, but this is a common one. Lay 3 cards on the table. Each card position has a theme. In this case, past, present, future. Turn them over. Look at the card relationships. Let your intuition be your guide. Throw another card down if you want clarification on something. There's no hard and fast rules. And for me personally, there's no magic in the cards themselves. It's all up here. I think of tarot as a high-resolution ink blot test. And I think of it as a mirror to the subconscious. And I think of it as a means of corresponding and connecting with your inner self. Tarot is an important self-care tool for millions. Contrary to popular opinion and what I call the Hollywood effect, tarot is not really about predicting the future. It's actually an invitation to the present. It's a means of self-reflection. It can be a source of reassurance and a means of understanding what lies within us. And as taroist Tina Gong says, control lies within, not out. And tarot is a way to reclaim that control when we feel we lack it. So naturally, in the last few years of upheaval, guess what's been happening with tarot sales and tarot readings and tarot publications? At US Games, tarot sales rose 30% in 2016, which is the highest increase in 50 years. And in 2017, they rose another 30%. And you're thinking, like, what happened in 2016, right? In 2017, Dior did a Mother Piece themed runway show that was followed by a 263% increase in sales. And as far as design goes, Kickstarter recorded 37 tarot projects in 2013 and 88 in 2017. So I want to take you through the history and like evolution of tarot real quick. These are all cards in my own crazy collection that's been accumulating over the last few years. We're going to start with cards I don't own, but you can find these in a museum in Istanbul. These are called Mamluk cards, and they're actually not tarot cards, they're playing cards. Playing cards originated in China. They came west with the Silk Roads. The Islamic world sort of embellished them and a regular playing card is about a quarter the size of one of these. These are big old cards. So apparently playing cards are older than tarot cards as far as we know. Before printing presses, tarot cards were handmade by artists for wealthy people. The Visconti Sforza was most likely made as a wedding gift. 1420 is the earliest date associated with this family of tarot cards. And the Sola Busca was from 1491. It actually influenced a few of the Rider-Waite-Smith cards, and I showed the ones that were influenced up there. Although the major arcana of this deck are based on royal pedigrees, spanning from Roman emperors to kings of the ancient world like Nebuchadnezzar. So the major arcana are totally different. But regardless, it is still considered the first complete tarot with illustrated pip cards. Many people think the Rider-Waite-Smith was the first. The French mystic Jean-Baptiste Alliette created the first tarot deck intended for divination work. Before the Book of Thoth, tarot cards were used for a bridge-like game called Taroki. This tarot incorporates many elements of Western esotericism like astrology, the classical elements, and the four humors. There are many versions. Here's the next one is the Marseille, and there are many versions of the Marseille cards, both old and new. It's a very popular deck with roots in the 1700s. The imagery has a strong medieval influence, and the artwork has an endearing sort of wonkiness to it. The Minciate is unique for its bonus 12 zodiac cards and a card for each of the four classical elements. A point of interest for collectors, I bought this in 2012 for 20 bucks. It's now worth over $900. Pretty crazy. The ancient Italian tarot, this is my favorite of the old tarot decks. The images are very clear, the colors are solid, and it has an old world sort of goofiness to it. Most of these 20th century decks have unconventional elements about them. In some cases you find major additions, substitutions, exaggerations, subtractions to what we now know as conventional tarot cards, but the skeleton of the tarot was still being formed and refined. So Eliphas Levi, or Levi, is perhaps the most important esotericist of the 19th century. He wrote over 20 books about the subject and revolutionized the world of tarot by combining it with alchemy and Kabbalah and the Hebrew alphabet and the Tree of Life and other esoteric subjects. His book, The Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic, it's interesting. He in his mind, magic is a combination of astral light, the will, and the imagination. San Martin said astral light is like psychic force. And it's interesting that if you read the lectures on faith, there's a lot of similarities between Joseph Smith's definition of faith and astral light. It's interesting. So, the Rider-Waite-Smith and Thoth tarot shown here are products of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was a short-lived but highly influential organization that existed between 1887 and 1903. Though this tarot was created in the late 30s and 40s, it wasn't published until 1969. Its creators, Aleister Crowley and Lady Frida Harris, both died before it was published. I showed you the Aquarian tarot from the year after the Thoth, 1970, it was published. The Morgan Greer is a combination of the Rider-Waite philosophy of tarot and Paul Foster Case's tarot ideas, who was another influential esotericist and founder of the Builders of Aditum, another tarot-based organization that still exists today. The Jungian tarot is full of awkward 1980s fashion, but supposedly the colors and symbolism are dead on. Robert Wang is a pretty serious student of Jungian psychology, Kabbalah, alchemy, and tarot symbolism. I've met some folks who are not fans of Carl Jung, but the way I see it, Jung is to esotericism and the arts, you could say maybe like what Isaac Newton was to physics or something. He revolutionized it. The ideas of archetypes, collective conscience, shadow work, active imagination, and individuation revolutionized modern perspectives on tarot and Western esotericism in general. As far as the arts go, anytime, let's say, a film like Star Wars or Titanic is a global hit across all continents, all cultures, languages, there's a Jungian somewhere involved. His ideas have helped shape that success, and those of Joseph Campbell and other adherents of Jung. The alchemical tarot comes from the cusp of the internet age. This is another, this sold at auction, one of these first editions, for $2,000. It's another biggie. Carl Jung wrote 4 books, if I'm not mistaken, on alchemy. He described it as alchemy as a sort of multi-thousand-year proto-scientific dream that eventually serendipitously culminates into chemistry and the sciences we know today. It's kind of fascinating. It's this deck is in its 5th printing now. It's a popular one. Anyway, so tarot in the present, I think postmodernism has had a major influence. The self-reflective nature of postmodernism and pop art slowly emerged in the 1950s and 60s with works by Jasper Johns, Robert Rauschenberg, who's one of my heroes, and Andy Warhol. The New Vision Tarot takes a sort of postmodern meta approach and shows the Rider-Waite-Smith scenes from a backstage perspective, enlarging the context and meaning of each card. Same with the Before Tarot and the After Tarot. I think it's important to mention oracle decks. They're sort of free-form, theme-based tarot decks. And one of my favorite is the Materia Prima, which just came out, and it's sort of like a modern attempt to re-enchant the periodic table of elements. It's an effort to help us not take for granted the beauty and mystery and accomplishment of the periodic table. I love it, it's fascinating. But the excitement for me is found in the alignment between whatever theme a tarot designer chooses and the archetypes of the tarot. And Frederick Jameson called this process a pastiche or a postmodern parody or a blank parody. This is where the Mormon tarot fits in the whole scheme of things. There's a lot of beautiful tarot decks like the Fountain Tarot, which don't really rely on postmodern tropes, and the Simple Tarot, but they're beautiful. There's tons of them nowadays. Not all decks are blank parodies and whatever, but there's an emergence, surge of these types of decks, like the Game of Thrones Tarot that just came out recently. Liz Dean is a tarot scholar, and it's interesting. I don't know if any of you guys thought about tarot while you were watching Game of Thrones, but there's a lot of those archetypes there. So we have the Zombie Tarot. I love it. This is hilarious. The Housewives Tarot is hilarious. Look at the death card. It's Salmonella. Just showing that there's archetypes in even the most banal aspects of life. The Guillermo del Toro Tarot, what's it called? The Shape of Water. That's the fourth card from the left, the Lovers. So he's that filmmaker who's great at creating monsters. It's a fun one. This is the Twin Peaks Tarot, Disney Tarot, the Ukiyo Tarot, which is based on more like world culture. Same with the Oracle of Dreamtime. And I'm sorry if I'm going through those too quick. There are a lot of tarot decks address issues of race and diversity. This says representation matters, especially with archetypes of magic and power. So that's the melanated classic tarot. The Wild Unknown is more about nature and wildlife. And then there's a lot of art history themed tarot decks, and I love these. My favorite is the Klimt Tarot. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. There's a lot of liberties taken in some of the alignments, but it's beautiful. So anyway, back to Tenzing Momo. Just want to talk briefly about the Mormon Tarot and just how I came about the idea and whatever. So in 2009, I'm learning about tarot. I'm listening to podcasts and reading books about Mormon history. I'm learning about Jung and Campbell, and my worldview is evolving. I'm looking for new ways to appreciate my Mormon heritage. And I came across this quote by Joseph Campbell, and it resonates with me quite a bit. Essentially, all religions are true from a metaphorical perspective, but watch out when you start taking things too literally. I also love this story about Minerva Teichert. The famous artist and art professor Robert Henry asks Minerva, "Has any artist told the great Mormon story?" And she says, "Not to suit me." "Good heavens, girl," he retorts, "what a chance." I love that story. And there's that idea of writers should write what they know, things like that. For me, the Mormon Tarot is an attempt to frame early Mormon history in a way that suits me. And I want to focus on the metaphorical angle. And so 95% of the Mormon Tarot cards that I've been working on are based in historicity, not so much in faith claims. And so you could kind of say the Mormon Tarot is a metaphorical perspective on early Mormon historicity. So I'm looking at the Magician card, and the Magician is about manifestation, He's a conduit and a contact between the spiritual and physical worlds. The surrounding foliage represents the power to fulfill potential. Rachel Pollack, a noted tarot scholar, I love this. She calls it a metaphysical lightning rod, channeling macrocosmic energy into the microcosm. Anyway, and start thinking about, oh, look how interesting things line up there. That's amazing. It's like, great art usually starts with good archetypes, whether it's in tarot or in Mormon history, and this, there's sort of like, I think of it as like a resonance quotient. This idea resonates in Mormon culture. There's tons of artwork about it. And then there's the one I created. And you'll see like the four suits in the tarot card. I've adapted them to the 4 sacred objects of Mormonism. In 2017, I was working on this project, and I was like, I just wonder how this is going to be received. I submitted it to the Springville Religious and Spiritual Art Show, just figuring that's a good kind of litmus test. If they accept it, then that's good. If they don't, then and it was accepted. Rita loved it. She studied tarot at her PhD, and it got an honorable mention. And I was like, wow. I was stunned. The breakthrough for me was when about this whole idea of a Mormon tarot, is when I consciously realized that what I had been intuitively feeling all along, that the tarot was the perfect vehicle to tell the story of early Mormonism, because it encouraged, even forced, an honest, comprehensive view of the history, warts and all. You can't just leave out the Ten of Swords, the Death card, the Devil, the Tower. The light and shadows are equally important. There are so many forces within individuals and institutions that seek to ignore and neglect the shadows. And we want to whitewash and sweep things under the rug. Interesting, as a painter, one of the most important keys to a luminous painting is to look for the light that's in the shadows and understand what to do with it. And so there's truth in the shadows, and the tarot is a handy tool of understanding and revealing personal truth. So this is the quote I've adopted as the motto of the Mormon tarot. The idea of bracing all truth was said dozens of times by Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. And for me, I've always associated Mormonism with this idea. When I hear Mormonism, I think of this idea. So anyway, it's on the back of the cards and stuff. I wrote it in the Deseret alphabet. The Marriage of Arnolfini, I don't know if you guys ever saw this painting in art history in high school or something, but it's, each one of these elements, the shoes, the dog, the colors, the poses, everything tells a story. Especially in pre-literate, like medieval culture, symbolism and imagery was the first language almost in terms of literacy. And so let me just real quickly show you some of the symbolism that I've used to kind of tell more of a story. I usually have a milk layer and a meat layer with each of the cards. That's kind of how I think about it. On the surface, this is Joseph and Emma, obviously with the church in the background. In a lot of traditional tarot cards, you have one man who's choosing between two women, and choices is kind of core to the lover's card. But I want to tell more of the story as much as possible. So I use Victorian flower symbolism. At the very bottom there, you'll see Joseph standing on some forget-me-nots, which represent true love. He's standing on them, but they're not dead. There's a coriander plant to the right, which represents the lusts of the flesh. There's a mock orange in the middle with 33 or 35, I can't remember, blossoms, representing all those polygamous wives. And then mushrooms, which represent sort of like bishop's wife syndrome, loneliness, isolation, and resilience. And so this kind of tells that story of their complicated relationship. And not only that, but real quick, sorry, back here, the church is also a bride. I mean, it kind of is, choosing between the two. And in the Rider-Waite Smith, there's a mountain there. So it's also the mountain of the Lord. Anyway, so there's a lot of layers there, and that makes it fun for me. Typically, the Hanged Man is not a death pose. It's not a death card. And someone brought that up to me once, and it's a good point. There are some death cards, death poses. More often, it's someone who's in a state of limbo. And from the Mormon history perspective, the first presidency of the church wasn't organized for 3.5 years after Joseph's death. And so there definitely was a period of the church hanging in limbo. A lot of things going on here, like the water. Well, let's talk about the inverted star. Those are actually there. I think the real magic is when the archetype intersects with reality. Here's a picture of Carthage jail, and those two stars are inverted, just like the star in the Nauvoo temple and things. The star represents sacrifice. It represents, like here it says, the morning star descends to earth to receive the 5 wounds of the crucifixion. So it represents Christ, but we all know Mormonism sort of looks at Joseph Smith as a type of Christ. And the well, water is absolutely central to the hangman, the traditional hangman tarot. In tarot philosophy, the hangman, this is the Golden Dawn, which was one of the big groups of societies that was based on tarot. Their hangman was hanging over water, and Aleister Crowley's is as well. And if you look real closely at the bottom, there's the element of water symbol. Water is associated with Mem, and Mem is the Hebrew letter that's associated with the hangman card. So it is kind of, once again, that he fell by a well. It's another place where the reality intersects with the archetype. The coin or the talisman, there's a little coin falling out of his pocket. This happens in a lot of the hangman cards. Some hangman cards are associated with Judas and his bag of silver after betraying Jesus. Anyway, the Jupiter talisman, it could be a Jupiter talisman if you're okay with that. I know that's a controversial thing for some people. It could be a coin. For me, it's the Jupiter talisman, and I also included it in the Hierophant card. He's actually wearing it. And then the pepper box pistol, which I think it's a little symbol that tells so much more about the story of what happened in Carthage. How the 2 pistols were smuggled into a prison, but they weren't in the jail cell. They were in the jailer's bedroom, and it's just a really gray situation. So in all the other Joseph Smith cards, his hands are sort of a symbol of his powers of influence. In the Fool card, he's got his hand up around his chin, kind of showing his power of wits and imagination. The other hand's on his Bible and next to his seer stone. In the Lover's card, his hand is around Emma's hand, showing Emma's support. And the other hand is around a ring, showing how he kind of wielded his promises of the blessings of eternity as a means of persuasion. And in the Hierophant card, he has one hand on the serpent cane, which has some Jupiter symbolism on it, by the way, according to Michael Quinn. And then the other hand is, just like in the traditional Hierophant card, it shows the Godhead and his prophetic authority. So there's some callbacks, I guess you could call it. And anyway, and I guess real quick, here's the High Priestess card. It's Emma. And one of the big things about this card is the polarity between the 2 poles. And so, there's fire on one side, there's water on the other, there's heat and there's cold. The ice cube was invented in 1844, which is crazy. There's a lot of, the chair has the moon symbolism that's in the traditional tarot. And the thing about this card, she's holding Emma's blessing, which after Joseph was killed, or before, he's going to Carthage, before he's killed, Emma says, "Could I have a blessing?" And he says, "I don't have time to give you one, I'm sorry. Write your own, and I'll sign it when I come back." And he never returned. But this blessing still exists today. You can read it, and it's like a snapshot of her psyche. It's really interesting. And of course, there's a snuffed out candle up on the mantelpiece. So this is kind of describes that moment. And that's all I have for you. So, but thank you guys. Let Cheryl take over.
Okay, we're ready to start. 174 years ago today, July 29th, 1847, 152 members of the Mormon Battalion arrived in the Salt Lake Valley accompanied by wives, children, and 47 Mississippi Mormons. This swelled the existing population to over 400. William Clayton wrote, "The soldiers appearing in military order, many of them mounted. They have 29 wagons in the company and 1 carriage." I mention this just to illustrate one of the many iconic items in Mormon history. What Mormon does not feel a swell of patriotism when thinking about the Mormon Battalion, a group of Mormons who volunteered to serve on the side of the United States in the Mexican War, even though they had been persecuted and driven from the state of Illinois? The money they earned from the Army helped fund their families and fellow religionists' trek to the West. The Mormon Exodus itself is iconic, recalling the biblical Exodus, a large group of people cast out into the wilderness for the sake of their religion and braving hardship along the way to a promised land. Many Utahns celebrated the entrance of the Mormon pioneers into the Salt Lake Valley just last week on July 24th. These things are archetypes, patterns, or models which embody universal meanings and basic human experiences. Archetypes are powerful because they apply to many human experiences and tap into the collective unconscious. Tarot cards derive much of their power from the use of archetypes. The Tower card, for example, represents destruction, upheaval, chaos, and change. We see this archetype over and over from ancient times. A nursery rhyme may have its origin in the 9th century, contains this theme: London Bridge is falling down. Have any of you played that as a child? The archetype is so universal that many countries have their own versions. I'm going to show you one from Denmark called Bro Bro Bria, and it's got a lot of archetypes in this. Hopefully this will play, and you can search for the archetypes as we listen. All right, where's Okay, now look for archetypes. Love that little part. Okay, that's awesome. Did you see the archetypes in there? I mean, you don't have to be Danish to know. They're, you know, the words say bridge, bridge, glasses. The bell rings 11. The emperor stands on his high white castle. So we saw the emperor in white, as white as chalk, as black as coal. And you saw the two different colors. There are many, many archetypes in this little ditty. And the same theme is found in Humpty Dumpty as well. It was said to have referred to a cannon in 1648, something that is damaged cannot be repaired again. However, in tarot, the most common reading is an event, for this is the Tower, is an event that shakes you to your core. I should probably go back to the Tower, but an event that shakes you to the core, affecting you spiritually, mentally, and physically. Change is here to tear things up, create chaos, and destroy everything in its path. But the destruction will allow new growth to emerge, and your soul can evolve. So both Josh and I chose the Nauvoo Temple as our Tower card, because this is really just iconic in Mormonism. Let's see. The destruction was heartbreaking and distressing to those who had been repeatedly cast out and who had put their all into building their beautiful city on the Mississippi. But as it's true in the Tarot Tower card, its fall led the way to growth in the Intermountain West, which eventually spread throughout the world, came full circle, and was rebuilt 158 years later in 2002. So if you have Latter-day Saint background or Mormon background, you can connect with this tarot card and apply it to heartbreak, damage, and destruction in your life, but also to a new beginning and rebuilding. So with all of my tarot cards, I used, similar to Josh, I used my knowledge of Mormon history to find archetypes in Mormonism that would emotionally move and inspire Latter-day Saints. So one example for me is the Hierophant card. So this right here, these are historical Hierophant cards that were used in the past. You have a papal staff and crown that represents spiritual authority and also the Holy Trinity of earth, heaven, and the spirit world. The golden cross keys, you see those in mine too, mine's on the left there, are used to unlock the doors to heaven. In our case, it's the priesthood keys, right? The hands and the gesture of blessing with 2 fingers bent and 2 fingers extended are symbols of the seen and unseen, which further underlies the bond of the material and spiritual worlds. He is accompanied by 2 apostles, monks, friars, depending on who it was drawing that. Okay, now check mine out over here on the, no, not there. Oops. Okay, so mine on the left. Who is that? Anybody know? Bryce. Oh, you're just like, oh, you took it. All right, okay, so that is, of course, Sidney Rigdon. Okay, and who is down at the bottom there? Do you know that? No, that is Alexander Campbell and Joseph Smith. And so Sidney Rigdon had those religious influences in his life. So he had the Alexander Campbell influence, and then he also has the Joseph Smith influence with the priesthood keys in the middle there. So there's all kinds of symbolism in that card, and we might talk about that a little bit more later. But I'm going to go on to the next one real quick. Okay, so this one is my 3 of Swords. And I also have some of the more traditional ones. Here is a pip card before they had pictures. The middle one is the Rider-Waite-Smith, and the last one is a more modern tarot card. So you see the symbolism there. What does that make you feel? What does that make you think of? The heart being pierced by those swords. Does that make you feel something? All right, so this card is disintegration, loss, and upheaval in life. So for mine, I have the Masonic all-seeing eye there. And so to me, that makes a difference and makes it more Mormon, because we have the eye representing God being pierced. So maybe the loss of God or the loss of faith as you once knew it, and the opportunity to then pierce the veil. It leaves space in your heart to pierce the veil and come to know God yourself. So anyway, that's just my interpretation of it. And when you see that card, you are going to feel your own emotions, and you're going to connect with something unconscious in yourself. And that's what tarot does. The next one is, I'm also going to show you the Lovers, which Josh showed you also as well. Let's see. Okay, so here's this is what he was talking about, the one where somebody's choosing between 2, making the choice between 2 lovers. And there is the Rider-Waite-Smith, where you just have the man and the woman, the male and the female, connecting. Here is a more modern one, and I thought this was interesting because whoever had drawn this deck said, "The lovers, need I say more?" And at first I was like, yes, you need to say more. It can't just be like 2 people dancing around. You know, the lovers is more than that. The lovers is, you know, so symbolic. It doesn't just mean a man and a woman. You know, it means it can be like unity, bringing together the subconscious, the conscious, masculine, female energies. And so another more modern card here I thought was much better suited to bring out those feelings, because it doesn't just have a man and a woman in love. It has like a lot more symbolism. So if we go over to my card, which is the large one on the left, so I have the young Hebrew boy and the Lamanite girl, and so we're bringing together the Hebrew scriptures and the Book of Mormon. And you again have the all-seeing eye. In the background you have the tree of life and the tree of knowledge and of good and evil. And we also have mountains in the background symbolizing. So this is more of a Mormon take on what the lovers are. So when you think of the rod of Jesse and the rod of, what are they? The two different rods coming together to become one in thine hand. That's your Mormon unification of two different traditions. All right, so the next one I have, yeah, there it is. Okay, Jane Manning James. So what does she call up for you? Strength, right? She calls up a lot of strength and courage, charisma, faithfulness. So she's got a sunflower, she's got a little cat down at the bottom, and there's the Nauvoo mansion house where she spent a lot of time. And I feel that she is, even though she was sealed to Joseph Smith as a servitor, I feel that in heaven she is a queen. So I put that big crown right on her head. So she represents just some Mormon stamina, strength to me. Okay. The Three of Cups is a card of celebration, friendship, sisterhood, and creative collaborations. By turning to your friends, you will receive love, support, and compassion. Now, a Mormon tarot card, I chose this Relief Society presidency, early Relief Society presidency, including Eliza R. Snow. And they are showing friendship. They succor their sisters with plentiful herbs in their teapots. And the card also has a connotation, if it's turned upside down, of overindulgence. So that's why I use tea, because that can mean, in Mormonism, that can mean something a little bit forbidden. So, okay. My Five of Cups, it usually is interpreted as disappointment. This gravestone is Alvin Smith. He died early on. Some say that he was he was thought of by the family, the Smith family, as that he would be the prophetic figure in the family. But then he died, and so then they had to turn to Joseph Smith. So this card, the reader will always call your attention to the disappointment of the three cups that are turned over and emptied, but yet there are two cups that are still standing, and those are Joseph and Hiram. So they were left to carry on the tradition. All right, just one more here. Actually, I have two more slides. Okay, Seven of Pentacles. You see that farmer there with his bounty. The Seven of Pentacles is a card of growth. It stands for assessment, reward, and change of direction. So I have this Mormon polygamist with his rake and his harvest, and what he has harvested and the change of direction that's happening is we have Mormon feminism with Martha Hughes Cannon, who was a Utah state senator, and we have Sonia Johnson, Lavina Fielding Anderson, Margaret Toscano, Kate Kelly, Lindsay Hansen Park, and Natasha Helfer, the most recent. So this is an interesting card which can call all kinds of things to your mind depending on how you think of Mormon feminists. Is it the bounty that we're finally reaping in the church, or how does that relate to you? And everyone's going to have a little bit different perspective, as you will in these cards, because these are pages, and I chose feminine pages. And they are the wives of Joseph Smith, the young wives of Joseph Smith. In each card you can see Joseph Smith peeking out somewhere. And I guarantee you everyone in this room has a different feeling about Mormon polygamy and about, how that affects your life. So it's kind of our collective angst that we have over polygamy. Even the ones that are maybe from a polygamous tradition that still follow that, there's still a lot of angst going on there. So I love these pages. They always, like, every time I get a page, I'm thinking about, kind of the courage these young women had and the resilience they had, and yet, ways that they were kind of used and did not have a choice in much of what they did, but then in other ways they did. So I don't know, you can tell it's all mixed up in my mind, like it is in probably a lot of your minds. But in this presentation today, we are not saying that Joseph Smith or any early Mormons used tarot cards as a divination technique. However, Joseph was steeped in the esoteric tradition to which these cards belong. He sometimes purposely used these archetypes. So treasure seeking, for example, came from the alchemical school of thought, where the magician strives to bring treasures from the earth or turn lead to gold. Practitioners knew, they weren't, like, not all practitioners, alchemy practitioners, thought that they were actually going to turn that lead to gold ever. They knew that it represented something. It was associated with the human quest for perfection. So to turn ourselves, our lives, into gold. And I actually believe that Joseph Smith was familiar with this idea, and that this is what fascinated him about treasure seeking. Joseph also filled the Book of Mormon with archetypes, such as the profligate son Alma, who had a conversion experience, and the Rameumptom Tower, where the prideful lorded it over the poor. Other times, events in his life or in the history of the Latter-day Saints formed archetypes organically, without Joseph's influence. The Mormon tradition is really quite amazing that way. Joseph and then other Mormons made the spiritual tangible. They pulled the unconscious into the conscious. And that's what's so fascinating to me about early Mormonism. I can't see into the future, and I'm not even very experienced or skilled in reading tarot. My husband was very good at it, and so that's why I came to my interest in tarot. But I've actually had a couple of experiences of my own doing readings with my Joseph Smith tarot, which is brand new. And one of the experiences was my daughter, who has not spoken to me in over a year, called me and was upset because she had broken up with her boyfriend. Now, she was really, really upset about this breakup. She is almost 30 years old. And she is one of my only daughters who's not married. And she was very, very upset about this breakup. And she asked me for my advice. And I kind of had no advice because I didn't feel like this was a good fit for her. And I didn't want to tell her that. That would not have been helpful. So I kind of mumbled around, and she said, well, what do you think Dad would say? Just kind of wanting some kind of advice. And her father is deceased, so we couldn't know what he would say. I think I might know a few things he would say, but instead I said, Franny, do you want me to read your tarot? And so I did a spread for her of the Joseph Smith tarot. And my daughter is very Mormon. She's a returned missionary, and it was an amazing experience because she connected with the archetypes in that card and sort of, gave her comfort, the things that she drew. So it was really an awesome experience. Another experience was with my colleagues at work, none of whom are Mormon, heard that I was coming to this conference and wanted me to do their Mormon tarot for them. So we sat in a circle, and each of them drew a card from their past. They drew a card for their present. They all drew a card for their future. We had an amazing experience with that, too, because I was able to explain to them when they drew a card, I was like, oh, that represents fertility, and here's the Mormon story behind that. And then they were like, wow, that's true, I really was, Anyway, so it was a really good experience for me as well. And so I thought it would be fun to just grab a couple of you who've chosen cards here. If you wouldn't mind standing up and telling us what card you got And do you think that it represents anything in your life? Like, is it you? And we have a microphone right there, right? Where? There, right in front of me. So anyone want to tell us what you drew? Come on up and show us the card you drew.
Okay, and I just drew this one. I didn't go through and seek, and I got the world.
The world.
Yeah.
Yes.
What does it mean, Cheryl?
Okay, so hang on just a second. Because I have to get my little cheat sheet out. Where is it? Who has the little box?
This cheat sheet?
Yes, that's the cheat sheet. Okay. And you'll see that that is actually Wilford Woodruff over in the corner there, who's telling the story of the Mormon world. He's the one that wrote it down for us, right? And we have, let's see, in the world we have, okay, Nauvoo is placed in the center of the world with Wilford Woodruff, the adept chronicler of that world. The 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, which are usually in the tarot deck, we replaced with Porter Rockwell, who was a destroying angel, Eliza Partridge, which is a bird. Usually it's, you know, what bird is it on the tarot card? A raven or something? But she's a partridge. And then we have Brigham Young, the Lion of the Lord, and Lyman White was the wild ram. So keywords for this card are mastery, perfection, attainment, realization.
Thank you.
Do you relate to that card?
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else? Yeah, come on.
Will you explain Queen of Wands one more time?
Queen of Wands? Okay, so we got Queen of Wands. This is Jane Manning James again. Early African American Mormon, sits regally behind the Smith's mansion house. Represents courage, charisma, enterprise, faithfulness, independence, and dignity. Do you relate to that?
I'm Swanee. I'm from South Carolina. The courage part that really spoke to me. Also, another reason I chose this. I'm from South Carolina, raised Mormon. Have not practiced in 32 years. But the racism part really spoke to me. And just last month, I was here with some cousins quilting. I'm down at the quilting, come see us. And I learned that one of our relatives came from winter quarters to Utah with an African American. So that part has been very important to me. So the dignity, just all the things that I've learned living in South Carolina for 32 years, and the true problems that we were having today. So I admire this woman so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's do one more. Who else has a card they want to bring up? Come on up.
So I picked the 9 of Pentacles.
Okay, 9 of Pentacles. So Pentacles represent kind of your fortune, your material wealth. And the 9 of Pentacles is culmination. We have on this card fruitful vines and 9 young women's medallions surround a woman who is dressed in the robes of the priesthood, having received her temple endowment. Legacy, comfort. And this card might have, the other side of this card might be deception or roguery, something like that. How does that relate to your life?
I was kind of looked up on my phone after I picked it, some other interpretations and what it was meaning. And I think I have a lot of abundance in my life, a very busy schedule, Sunstone this week, and it's all wonderful opportunities. But I think it is hard. It's difficult on me, and just seeing this woman in the temple, and I haven't been able to go in the temple. I don't know. There's just a lot of thoughts, and what do I want and what do I have and what do I need for myself. So
That's cool. Okay, how many minutes do I have left?
We have 25 minutes.
Okay. All right, so let's go on for just a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to circle back to the history of the tarot, which Josh covered really well. It emerged from the European psyche at the beginning of the 1400s, and political and religious forces in the 14 and 1500s forced tarot into a situation where it had to be camouflaged to obscure its radical content. So variations on some of the major arcana were imposed by papal order. In spite of being conventional religious figures, the Pope and Popess were seen as problematic and were replaced with secular figures in some regions during the 18th century. For example, the Besançon deck substituted the Roman deities Jupiter and Juno for the Pope and Popess. These changes were made in heavily Protestant areas in France, Germany, and Switzerland, where people didn't want to see Catholic imagery on their cards. Let's see here. Okay, so also we have here a set of cards on the top, a similar, almost exactly the same set of cards on the bottom. You can see were censored with clothing because people did not like the nudity that was in there. So we have a lot of censorship and changes that have gone on in the tarot over the years. And we've actually fallen into the same censorship pitfall that we see here, and also that we sometimes lament very loudly in the LDS Church. As you've noticed, one of our presenters is not here today. On Tuesday, he was told that he'd been dropped from the session for violating the zero tolerance policy for sexually explicit and exploitative imagery. So Gazalem had prepared our section on historical tarot decks of the past, and he was not planning on presenting any of his own deck, which was the deck that was under question. And he was removed. He was also removed from the Hoover app. He was informed that this is not a decision that is able to be appealed. I want to quickly just give you his statement, just real fast, because I feel like he deserves to be represented here today and not erased. And so this is his statement. I'm sorry that I could not present to you all today. My presentation was going to be on the history of tarot and how religion has superimposed itself upon the game since tarot's inception. Sunstone has banned me from this conference because of the artwork contained in my Mormon Endowment Tarot and a CD which was produced over 15 years ago, and it was controversial. That's my part. The Mormon Endowment Tarot I created shows the human body in its natural form, which I felt was extremely important in order to convey the naivete and innocence of Adam and Eve before the fall. The source material for my collages were from a naturalist magazine I bought from a bookstore in downtown Salt Lake City and from the National Geographic. The naturalist magazine showed European families enjoying wholesome activities. Imagine that, being banned from Sunstone because of using photos from a naturalist magazine, nothing of which had to do with my presentation today. The presentation I was going to give was on the history of the tarot and did not feature the artwork contained in my Mormon Endowment Tarot or the CD. Sunstone has refused to let me explain my artwork and has denied me absolutely any possibility to appeal their decision. They've also banned me from the entire conference, which makes me extremely sad because I was looking forward to going to the memorial of my friend Mike Quinn. Please consider these words while attending this conference. So this is a symposium with diverse thought and open-mindedness. So hopefully we can think about some of these themes as, we encounter things that are difficult and challenging. I'm not going to show you the art that was objectionable, but instead I'd like to make an analogy with the little cherubs on the two versions of these lovers cards. This art is not sexually explicit or objectionable, although it portrays a child who is nude. Modern Europeans see nudity in a different and, I dare say, more healthy way than Americans. But some might disagree because this is a strong issue and there are two sides of the story. I'm showing you one side. Gazelan's exclusion from this panel says more, I think, this is my opinion, about the gaze of those who made the decision and their fears than it does about his actual artwork. My hopes for the future is, because we're talking about the past, present, and future of tarot, and my hopes for the future is that we avoid the kind of binary thinking that led to this decision. There's long been a debate about the differences between art, erotica, and pornography. I feel the need to protect victims. Absolutely a need to protect victims, and that is a big issue in the decision that Sunstone made here. But also, I feel a need to foster communication and an exchange of ideas. This is what was missing in the botched trial of Natasha Helfer, and it was certainly missing here. So considering this controversy, I feel like we can allow for comments as well as questions during our Q&A. So I'd love for you to give any comments you have about this issue or about our tarot. And I would also like you to keep those comments very, very brief so that all who want to have the opportunity to speak, we can hear their thoughts on this.
Okay, I actually have a comment and a question.
Okay.
The comment that I have is I did purchase a set of Gazelam's tarot cards. I think they're wonderful, and I would encourage anybody else to give some serious consideration to buying a set. The question that I had, Cheryl, was on the Pope and Popess that you showed. Was that representing Pope Joan, or where did the Popess come in? I'm not familiar with that term.
Yes, a lot of people feel that the female Pope on there, the Popess, did represent that back in, I can't remember the dates, 14?
The Essenes. I think the Essenes, that like a Christian sect.
Well, back in the Catholic Church, they had an early person who was a woman who passed as a pope for a short time, and it was Pope Joan. And yes, that card does refer to Pope Joan, yes. Okay, questions and comments. Let us have it.
Well, you're right there, but I guess I'll use this microphone.
Yes, please.
First, I want to just say, give a shout out to Josh's work on, so far what I've seen, and also he is on Patreon. I think I'd like to put a plug in for that.
Cool, thank you.
And I support him on Patreon, not because he's got little perks.
What's your name?
Kendall.
Okay.
Golden.
Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
my tag flipped over.
Yeah.
I support him on Patreon, not because I want the little perks, but just because it's a project that I'm very passionate about, and I just want to see it move forward. So just want to put the plug in. If you guys want to support this, I would recommend.
I appreciate that. That's awesome.
But I do have a question on it. I want to know where you're at with the status of the major arcana. I know you were toying with the minor arcana.
Yeah.
And not pressure. I just want to know. It's awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, I didn't really talk about that. All the major arcana are totally finished, and all the minor arcana have been started, and they're in various states of completion. And I'm just a very non-linear person, and I think time is my greatest asset in a way. Like I'm trying to figure out what's going to work for this card, and I just kind of sit on it and I get ideas. So I just choose whatever card that I have an idea for to work on. And some of the minor arcana are becoming finished right now. So I started this in 2009, and I spent the first 4 years just doing research. I didn't even really commit anything, any of the alignments that I felt would work, but I wasn't sure. 2017 was when I showed some cards at Springville, and also came to Sunstone with some cards. Anyway, where was I going with that? Well, I wasn't working on it full time, but now I am. So I'm hoping to have it finished in I'm hoping 2 years. It'll be, what's the anniversary of Moroni's visitation? It's September of 2023, I think. I think that would be the 200th year anniversary.
You got 1 year.
I'm going to try to have it done by
no.
then. So,
that is
thanks
2
for the
years.
question, Kendall.
Stay here, stay here.
What?
Stay here.
Any other questions?
Can you further explain
Yeah.
your...
Come up to the mic so we can have it
Oh.
recorded. Thanks.
You made a mention,
Yeah.
Bonnie again, you made a mention of a milk and a meat
Oh, yeah.
thing. Is that...
Does that make,
can you-
did that make sense? I mean, I know that's like, I think in the
I
New
understand
Testament.
Kosher,
Oh, I'm sorry. It's funny. I just meant like if there's a superficial layer. When you look at the cards, there's kind of an immediate meaning that comes to mind. But then, like the Marriage of Arnolfini by Jan van Eyck, you know, there's a bigger story there. And if you start to learn what the dog means and the shoes mean and the colors and the poses, I think the big question is whether or not. I can't remember about the Arnolfini. I haven't been in high school for so long. Anyway, but there's like this bigger story, and I'm trying to, in the other layers of the card, to tell that story, I guess, through symbols. And does that make sense? So, yeah,
Come on up.
that's where the fun is for me. So.
I have kind of a question that taps into maybe some of the elusiveness of tarot cards and of history in general, maybe. As foundation to the question, when I communicate with somebody who's 10 years younger than me or 10 years older, it's common that I feel like we're speaking a different language, or that we consume different books and movies growing up, and we completely miss each other's references and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So when looking at, this may be a better question for Gazalem, when looking at the history of tarot decks and looking at historical decks themselves, is it even possible to make assessments about what the specific cards are saying, or what the specific cultural influences were that caused such a deck to be created at such a time? Or is that a completely fickle and non-productive task?
So you're kind of talking about how tarot cards are a reflection of the culture that they come from. And I mean, I guess, do you have anything you ever want? It's a great
I
question.
think to a certain extent that's true. There are things that we don't know about the emperor and empress that, the political, tensions at the time that caused them to react to that card in a certain way. That's true. But also I feel that they put a lot of effort into the cards being archetypal, and so that they would have like certain meanings that were universal. And it's interesting that I think tarot survived so long up to this point just because they are universal. Because otherwise, if they were only germane to, the 15th century, they would be gone by now. We wouldn't have them. But year after year, people have reinterpreted them, used those archetypes to make the new decks, and used those same kinds of feelings that they get from the old decks. Because we both were making our own tarots, we were looking at the historical decks, and many people who carry on that tradition and do the art for new tarot decks look into the old historical decks and tap into that same wisdom. So it continues. But there's a certain, to answer your question, there is a certain amount of that, but they transcend that as well.
So can I follow up then?
Sure.
So then if the cards themselves are, very few people who would ever see this would actually know who Sidney Rigdon, Alexander Campbell, and Joseph Smith are, let alone their relationship with each other, and how the kind of love-hate triangle went, right? So if such things are archetypal while at the same time being very niche referential, but then we can only study the archetype of the older decks. If the archetypes mean everything, then can't they also just mean nothing?
Okay, so I'm really glad you asked that question, because, and I was sort of trying to do that here a little bit, but we don't have that much time to do it. But I have this little booklet that tells, the correspondences that I have, and you can also look online and see the correspondences that the cards have, but also those cards are supposed to appeal to your inner self. So you look at that card, and even if you don't know that man is Sidney Rigdon, you're like, he strikes me as being, you can get a feeling from the card, even not knowing what's on it. And that's kind of the magic of it, that it's like people interpret poetry. When I write poetry, sometimes people say, I got this out of it. And I was like, that's not what I was thinking at all when I wrote it. But yet it appeals to that, and it can touch them in that way. And tarot cards are the same way.
I just have one interest, kind of a thought along those lines. It's a really good question. So an archetype, the best definition I've heard of an archetype, it's a form without content. To me, there's a big difference between a pure tarot and a themed tarot. And a pure tarot is sort of, there's an anonymity to it. It's more about these forms. The archetypes has forms. You don't know who the people are. You don't know the locations. You don't know. But these themed decks that we're doing, we're plugging content into the forms. And so, yeah, they're different. Anyway. So.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the choice of the suits that you made, Josh. So instead of your traditional pentacles and cups, remind us what those are, what the suits are, and your decision on those.
Well, I'm just using the 4 sacred objects as the aces. And they do sort of line up in a way. It's kind of there's some liberty taken, but I'm sticking to the meaning of the original archetypes of the tarot. The Urim and Thummim is wands. That's what I'm using for wands. The Liahona, it looks like a cup. It's cups, and Nephi and sailing the ship. There's water, I guess, and cups represent water. What's the other one? Swords. So that works. The sword of Laban. And the plates are the coins or pentacles. So that's just how I'm using the. Okay. Does that make sense? Any other follow-up questions?
The golden plates are the pentacles.
The golden plates, yeah. And those are just going to be the ace cards. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, on the Hoover app it says, will there be options during the symposium to pay for a tarot reading? I remember seeing that in years past and would love to do one. We are not doing paid tarot readings. Neither Josh or I are really tarot diviners, but I would love to. If you want to come and explore the Joseph Smith tarot with me, I'd love to do that with you.
I'd like to. So Sarah Hanks, Sarah Stahaley Hanks, K.S. Hanks. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sarah. Sarah Hanks. She was here in years past. I think she was doing readings for money, but the money was for some kind of a charity, and I can't remember. Anyway, and I want to plug them, by the way. Sarah Hanks comes from a Mormon background. She's a tarot reader. You can find her at Cottonwood Tarot. We're collaborating a little bit on the book that's going to go along with my Mormon tarot. And another great tarot reader with a Mormon background is Zina Benyon. I think her website is something like Sago Strata or Sago something. So anyway, check them out, and they're both amazing. They're brilliant women. So, but yeah, we're not really novices. Sarah Hanks also has a Patreon called the Year of the Hierophant, or Hierophant's Year, and it's sort of like a year-long educational course for people who want to learn how to read cards. It's really interesting. Go ahead, Stephen.
I got one of Sarah's readings, and it was frighteningly prescient.
Very good.
Nice.
Very good.
Cheryl, I was curious about the pages. Which of Joseph Smith's wives did you choose, and was there a reason for?
So I didn't choose specific wives. I wanted them to be open. But each of those pages represents a different thing. So let me just show you. We have the page of Wands. One of Joseph Smith's young wives readies herself to cross the plains after his death. She carries a Book of Mormon and a fruiting branch, while a cactus blooms in the background. A salamander symbolizes fire. And this can mean a message, good news, optimism, pleasure, vigor, excitement. It can also, the reverse of that can be irresponsibility, immaturity, or foolhardiness. And so I just left it open. I didn't pick like which young wives they were. I just, because he had several young wives, it's kind of an archetype.
So it was specifically young wives, that was.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I think I have another question.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was just wondering how long you worked on your deck.
Okay, my deck I've just been working on for the last year. I worked very hard on the major arcana for this deck and really thought about the symbolism and really wanted each thing to mean a certain thing. And then I just wanted to finish it by the end of the year. So I just hurried on the minor arcana and I just like stuck but the interesting thing that happened was I like totally plugged into my subconscious while I was doing that. And some of those cards I really love. They're so right on and they're so meaningful to me and they just came out of my subconscious. So that's part of doing the tarot is like part of it is our research and our thoughts that go into it and part of it's just our subconscious.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Other cards, you want those back?
Yes. Yeah, just bring your cards up and stick them on the corner there.